In this moment, I release any thoughts, words, or ideas of Greg and allow you to speak through me. In this moment, I decrease so that you may increase. Now let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight. Let the words that I speak be words that transform. Let the words that I speak be words that encourage and inspire. For this I am so grateful, and I say amen. Amen. So it is. So we have a new series this month. Sci-fi and spirituality, supernatural. How many people got a chance to watch The Matrix? If you didn't come to the watch party, beautiful. Julie already shared with us next week, this coming Friday. Come through, we're watching Inception. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. So the thing about this series, that one of the things I love is that science fiction, Joseph Campbell talks about it, that really our modern sci-fi flicks and our summer blockbusters are our modern myths. And what Joseph Campbell teaches us is that the myths, whether you want to go to ancient African stories or Native American stories or use stories from the Bible, they can teach us something about life, about our own journey, and show us where we are on the path in our journey. And so we're going to use some of the ideas about Joseph Campbell. I didn't really put together an official recommended reading list, but if you want to read something this month to support you in this series, definitely by all means, grab the book version of The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell. You can also search and get the video if you want. The audio is available as well. But I think reading Joseph Campbell will really help you, support you in understanding how science fiction movies actually are some of the deepest spiritual teachings around. And so George Lucas, for instance, was a student of Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell's work is what inspired Lucas to write the Star Wars trilogy. The first three. We're not going to talk about those other ones. And by the same token, I'm a big Star Wars fan, but you know, the heart is those first three movies. And then by the same token, at the time, the Wachowski brothers, now the Wachowski siblings, were heavily influenced by Joseph Campbell as well. And so, The Matrix is one of my favorite movies, and we just had to start with it because I think it's rich and full of so many beautiful spiritual ideas. Our topic today is After the Red Pill. If you recall in the movie, or if you haven't seen the movie, there's a pivotal moment when the main character, Neo, finally meets this guy, Morpheus, that he's been searching for. And Morpheus asks him, does he want to know what the Matrix is? Does he want to understand what the Matrix is? And in order to see that, in order to understand that, he presents him with a question. To either take the blue pill, you take the blue pill, you can forget about me, that you ever knew me, and go back to your life as it was. Or you can take the red pill and continue the journey forward and to find out what the Matrix is and what sort of the meaning of life is all about. And so Neo chooses to take that red pill, to take the journey. And that moment in the movie is symbolic of our own journey. There's a choice that we've made in our lives, maybe to live life differently. Maybe we ended a relationship and we know that that relationship wasn't healthy for us, and so we want to be in a different relationship, and so we're seeking to date someone differently. We've taken the red pill. Maybe we've always taken jobs that were debilitating and painful and never really reminded us that we're worthy, never celebrated us, never moved us into a place that we wanted to be in our career and in our function, and we decided, I'm not taking those kind of jobs anymore. I'm going to do something different. We took the red pill in our life. Maybe we were someone that grew up in a family that never really had, maybe you grew up in poverty or a family that wasn't really responsible with money. You wanted to do something different in your life and have a different experience with money and your finances, but that would require you to do something different than what you've experienced. And so you took a red pill and saying, I want to have a different experience. I want to take a different choice, make a different choice. Last month we talked about walking without fear. And as we all have made that choice to leave fear behind, recognizing that fear doesn't serve us, we took a red pill to experience and do something different in our lives. But the question that I hear, we make those choices and that's beautiful, but it's, Pastor Greg, well, what now? Right? I took this red pill, I made this choice, I want to do something different in my life, I want to think different, I want to experience something different, I want to live a life without fear, I want to live a life on purpose, I want to live a life that affirms that I'm loved and worthy and powerful and all that God created me to be, as we sang earlier. But what do I do now? And many times, we begin to take that leap, and it actually seems like things get worse. Yes, yes. Many times it feels like things get a little more difficult. Yes, yes. Well, I remember a scene in The Matrix, just after they freed Neo's mind, and they bring him to the ship with Nebuchadnezzar. And if you remember that scene, they have him laid out, and they're working on him. They have all these acupuncture needles in his body, and they're taking the different connectors out of his arms and his body. And he asks Morpheus a question. He says, "Why do my eyes hurt?" And Morpheus says, "Because you never used them." And that's exactly what happens to us after we take the red pill and make those choices in our life. And it reminded me of another work that heavily influenced The Matrix. It's by Plato, The Republic. And in that book, it's several books, but in book 7 of The Republic, there's a famous story, the story of the cave. And it mirrors exactly this experience of the Matrix, and it mirrors what we go through in our life. And I want to share a little bit of this story. Just a little background. Plato wrote this book, The Republic, as a conversation. And he actually doesn't write it in his own voice. In the book, it's Socrates having a conversation with several other philosophers, his students, which is something, just as a note, interesting, because we think about Plato, he wrote the book, but he uses someone else's voice. When we look at the Bible and we look at certain letters that are attributed to Paul, that Paul never wrote, but they were written in his name, in his voice. This was a Greek, this is how the Greeks operated in many ways. And so we see the Greeks using that same thing in the Bible, where again, there are some letters that are authentic. Paul actually wrote them. But there are several letters in the Bible that Paul didn't write, but they were written in his voice. So we see that same motif happening here with the Greek philosopher Plato. And so Socrates is having a conversation with his student named Glaucon. And in the conversation, he sets up this story about a cave. And he said, imagine, if you will, that there's this cave. And in the cave, there are several people that are chained. They're chained and facing the wall. And they're chained in such a way that they can't look left or right. They can't see behind them. They can only see what's on that wall. And behind them is a fire. And there's someone, almost like a puppet master, creating shadows against the fire. And that's what they see on the wall. Now, if that's all you can see, that's all you know to be real. Yes, yes? Those shadows become their reality, and they begin to give names to those shadows. And they begin to think that those shadows are all reality. In the Matrix, you're connected to this computer program that tells you what reality is, and all you can see is what the computer shows you. Again, it's the same story. The Wachowski brothers were highly influenced by what Plato was doing. And so those shadows is all they see and know to be real, because that's all they can see. They can't move any other way. They're trapped. But in the story, he says, but there's one of the prisoners, a man who was freed. And when he's freed, of course, he gets up. And he can turn around, and now he sees that there's a fire behind us. And actually, it's the fire that's creating these shadows. But he asks Glaucon a question. He says, and if he is compelled to look straight at the light, will he not have a pain in his eyes, which will make him turn away and take refuge in the objects of vision which he can see, and which he will conceive to be in reality clearer than the things which are now being shown to him? This is interesting, right? Imagine for a minute. We know that, David, you were just saying earlier today, we had the lights off when we came in. Coming from the sunlight into less light, your eyes have to adjust. Yes, yes? And so when we're making this choice, when we've been freed by making this choice, and we can now see that there's actually a fire, when we look at that fire, though, your eyes hurt. Now, we consider that pain, right? We make a choice to do something different, to have a different type of relationship, to date a different type of person. But maybe that first date went just bad. And many times what we do, we'll say, well, I am never trying that again. I'm going to go back to what I know, because at least that's a pain that I'm familiar with. I've learned how to manage that. for so long. We talked the other week about sitting on the nail, right? The dog sitting on the nail. Maybe I've learned how to manage that pain and I'm used to that, so I'll go back to that. But what if all that's happening is that in the process of your being freed from the cave, you have to adjust your eyes to this light? And so that is, of course, what happens to this man. And now, though, let's remember, he's still in the cave. And he sees and recognizes now that there was something else creating those shadows. But now he also sees that there's light at the end of the cave. He's dragged out of the cave into the sun. And so Socrates asks another question. He says, is he not likely to be pained and irritated? When he approaches the light, his eyes will be dazzled, and he will not be able to see anything at all, what are now called realities. Again, another step in the journey. Because now not only are you're freed and recognizing what's creating those shadows, but now you're actually completely out of the cave. But that also creates an adjustment. Your eyes are not used to the sunlight. Your eyes got used to the light of the fire, but the light of the fire cannot create the same amount of light that the light of the sun can. And so finally, this free person, his eyes adjust to the sun. And Socrates says something interesting here. He says he will require to grow accustomed to the sight of the upper world. And first he will see the shadows best. Next the reflections of men and other objects in the water, and then the objects themselves. Then he will gaze upon the light of the moon and the stars in the spangled heaven. And he will see the sky and stars by night better than the sun, or the light of the sun by day. Last of all, he will be able to see the sun, and not mere reflections of him in the water, but he will see him in his own proper place and not in another. And he will contemplate him as he is. He will then proceed to argue that this is who gives the season and the years, and the guardian of all that is visible in the visible world. In a certain way, the cause of all things, which he and his fellows have been accustomed to behold. Now, after I read that, I said, oh my God, here's the blueprint. Here's the blueprint. Because see, again, we make these choices, and what we do is we make the choice to do something different, to experience something different, to walk through life differently. But as soon as that moment when our eyes need to adjust to the fire, we turn around and we say, oh, well, you know what? I'm better off with the shadows. And we lock our own selves back up and face the wall. Until something else prompts you again to free you again, and you got to look at that fire again. And you adjust your eyes to that fire, and you can stay there for a while, but then there's something that prompts you, and you see there's light further down. What is that? And you move out of the cave into the sun, but now it's another adjustment period. I've taken another red pill in my life, and now I have to adjust to this. And I'm pained and irritated. I love that he used the word irritated, because that's what happens. Sometimes I get so irritated with the process. But what would happen if you recognize that it is a process? And that's what I began to see here, that Plato was showing us that there's a blueprint that can allow us to be loving with ourselves. That as we take this red pill, we also know that there's steps along the way. And I'm going to take us through these 3 steps that Plato talks about, and that we see Neo take the same journey. He first talks about the shadows and reflections. Now, in the movie The Matrix, Neo began to experience certain things in the Matrix. He wasn't really satisfied with life. And he began to have different encounters, and Trinity showed up in his life, and Morpheus shows up on the phone via a FedEx letter. He was also in this struggle of knowing that there was something different about his life. If you remember the scene, he had to make a choice. His boss was telling him, you need to either comply with the rules of this world, or you're going to get fired. I can't take you kind of thinking you can do your own thing and not being what we want you to be here in these rules and systems, which is what happens in life. Because there's a point in time, I don't care what relationships you get in, you know your worth deep down inside. Yes. You know your worth deep down inside, and so there's something within you that is going to constantly invite you to make that choice and say, well, are you going to live up to your highest self? Are you going to live up to what you're truly worthy of, or are you going to accept this foolishness called a relationship? Oh, goodness. Now, I remember a time in my life It was an interesting moment, but it was a perfect metaphor for me. If you don't know, I had locks. I used to have locks. I grew them like all the way down on that. And if we're not Facebook friends, friend me on Facebook, you can see all the pictures, right? And literally, it was great. But what was interesting for me about that moment was, I just wanted locks, right? I thought it would be, a great hairstyle. But what I didn't recognize was the spiritual significance of the journey that I was about to undertake. And so, I started, my hair was twisted and I had small twists and I had to tie my hair down every day. And, I was working in the corporate world, and so you still have to look a certain way. But my hair was doing what it wanted to do. And so there was a struggle that happened because it was like, well, Greg, you made a choice. Now, prior to that, I was in the barbershop every week. Like, I had to stay fresh. That's how it was. Now, with my locks, it's funny, right? But with my locks, like, you twist them and you gotta let the process happen. You have to let the locking process happen. So it's not about, going to the barbershop every week to look good. You have to let the process happen. And it was like, wow. I would wake up each morning, I'd take the scarf off my head, and it was like, let me see what I can do. And I had to go through this journey of learning to love myself in a new way. Because it was no longer about, oh, I got a fresh cut, I know I'm ready. It wasn't about that anymore, right? It was, who are you? Who I am inside had to be enough. It wasn't about what my hair looked like. And every morning I would brush my teeth and look in the mirror and like, and I would have a conversation with myself. You can cut your hair whenever you want. You don't have to do this. But I wanted to follow this process through because there was a sense that I had in that moment that, wait, there's something powerful that can happen. I can learn to love myself in a way that I've never loved myself before. And so the weeks went by and the months went by. And I began to experience a change in my hair. The locking process happened and my hair began to do its own thing, but it started to grow. I remember as my hair got like around my ears, all of a sudden I started finding compliments. People, oh, I like your hair. Oh, I want to touch your hair. But what that was I had started to fall in love with myself and allowed the process to happen, and then it was reflected back to me in the compliments that I was getting. But again, this is that process that we go through with the shadows and reflections. In the beginning, it was like, I don't know if I want to do this. I really don't know if I want to do this. Because it was new and it was challenging everything that I thought I knew about myself or I thought I loved about myself. It forced me to go within and love myself from within. I'm reminded of a verse in the Gospel of Thomas, verse 2, that has a lot to do with this process. Jesus says in the Gospel of Thomas, those who seek should not seeking until they find. When they find, they will be disturbed. There's the first part. Again, you take the red pill and it's like, oh Lord, why did I take that red pill? They will be disturbed. And then he says, but when they are disturbed, then they will marvel and will reign over all. And so again, there's that process. It's three pieces. You're going to be disturbed at first. You're going to be pained and irritated, as Socrates and Plato says. But if you move through that period, as I did with my hair, I was disturbed. Lord knows I was disturbed. I began to move to that place of being marveled, but then it goes further. It says, and then you will reign over all. Because now, it doesn't matter what I'm wearing or what I look like. I know who I am, and I stand in that place regardless. I walk through the world, whatever building I'm in, whatever people I'm in front of, it doesn't matter. I know who I am, and I stand in that strong. Because I went through that process. And what I love, there's an addition that you don't find in all versions of the Gospel of Thomas. After it says, and you will reign over all. Then it says, and after you have reigned, you will rest. And what I love about that, because then that's that ease, we talk about easily and effortlessly all the time. Just walking through life easily and effortlessly. Because you understand the process. And so when you make a choice, I'm reminded, I was thinking about this week as I was preparing, I'm reminded of Oprah Winfrey's journey. Because we've seen her achieve great things in life. But what's interesting is that at the end of the show, she decided to do something new. She decided to create a network only. And as we all may know, she had some difficulties in the beginning. She took a red pill, decided to do something new that she's never done before. And it wasn't quite working out the way she wanted it to. And the critics were jumping at her right away. Oh, Oprah Winfrey, maybe she's not all that. Maybe she's not successful. Maybe she's just a talk show host. Maybe that's all she can really do. The chatter started. The fear came up. I can only imagine the conversations that were going on in her head late at night. But again, it was that same thing. First, you are disturbed. When you make that new choice, when you take that red pill, that has to happen. It's part of the process. But we see now, Oprah's new network is doing amazingly well now. But she made a choice that she was going to see the process through, understanding what the process is. And so, again, Plato talks about the shadows and reflections. But then the second step, he talks about how then you see the moon, the stars, and the heavens. And I love that part, that stage, that point that we get at, which I talked about. I began to start loving myself, and then people begin to say that back to me. It's beautiful. And I love that because I feel like that's our magical moment. And so many times you make a choice to go out and do something daring. You make a choice to go start a business. And it seems difficult in the beginning. But all of a sudden, as you push through that point, then it seems like people just show up out of nowhere. Then it seems like money shows up out of nowhere. Or all of a sudden, just doors open when they seem sealed shut. These beautiful moments begin to happen, and it's the magical moment. It's the law of attraction moment. But the thing I find interesting about that law of attraction moment is many of us stay there. We stay in that place of marveling and reigning over all, but never actually go to the rest place. Because see, you can stand in that manifesting place for a long time. You can stay in that place for a very long time. But the interesting part about that place is that you feel like you're still doing the work. And you're not surrendering to the universe doing the work. And that's the resting place. And so that's why we must continue the journey to this third place. When it says, then you see the sun. The sun is symbolic of the cause. The sun is symbolic of the source itself, the source of all life, where everything comes from. In ancient times and ancient ages, the sun was literally worshipped because the ancients understood that the sun represented the cycle of all life. And if you understood the cycles of the sun, you could actually understand how life works. It's in that moment that we enter the peace beyond all form. And it's in that moment when we enter the beauty that's beyond words. It's in that moment when we enter the ultimate bliss. It's in that moment when we can rest. And so then we continue to make choices as we always do in our life, regardless of where we are. The thing about our success is we walk up a mountain, we hit a plateau, and that's our success. But there's always something that's urging us to look up, and we see that there's a higher plateau for us to ascend to reach. There are always new choices to make. We were talking Friday night after the movie that beautiful progression that happens. You're unlimited. You're literally unlimited. And what begins to happen in our lives is we're here to express that unlimited nature as much as possible. And so we do great and grand things in our life. And then life is saying, you're bigger than that. We do powerful and amazing things, and maybe we finally find that relationship that's beautiful and affirming and loving and all that we dream. And then life says, and you're bigger than that. We start the business that we wanted to start, and it was beautiful, and we opened several locations, and then life says, you're bigger than that. Because you're unlimited. And so there's always a new opportunity to take the red pill yet again, yet again, yet again. Now with all of this, there's something that's even more powerful that is presented right in front of our face in the movie. The Matrix begins with Trinity in a hotel. The name of that hotel is Heart of the City. The Matrix ends in that same location, a hotel called Heart of the City. One of the things that's interesting about that is when we first see Neo in his apartment, the number of his apartment is 101 because he is the one, and we're at the beginning. The number of that hotel room is 303 because we're meeting Trinity. She's number 3. Now, what's also interesting about the number 3 is that the number 3 is actually a symbol of creation. You bring 1 and 2, I talk a lot about the masculine and feminine aspects. When you bring the masculine and feminine together, you have creation. 1 is the masculine number, 2 is a female number, and then you have 3, which is creation. It's new birth. And so, of course, if you remember the story, when Neo comes to that door and opens that door, 303, in the heart of the city, he is shot and killed. But we're in the heart. We're actually in the heart chakra in the movie. And then we see in the movie, Trinity says, I'm not afraid anymore. Because I recognize who you are and who I am. And everything that the oracle has said has come true. I know who you are and I love you. And she kisses him. And he wakes up. He comes back to life. But not only does he come back to life, but he has now risen into who and what he really is. He understands now, wait a minute, I understand where I am in the process. I'm now in that sun place. Recognizing that you're in the heart chakra. And this is why I say we must understand the process and bring love to the situation. When you understand the process, then you can be loving with yourself. You don't trip when you look in the mirror and it's like, oh Lord, my hair is a hot mess. You can love yourself. You don't trip when it just seems like, oh wow, everything is really difficult and I know I'm supposed to start this business. I know it deep in my bones and I have this vision for it, but things just aren't working out right. You can bring love because you understand where you are. You're in that same moment that Neo was in when he was killed by the agent, in the heart chakra. The thing I love also, the heart chakra, the word that's used to define the heart chakra is unstruck or unbeaten. And what that means is the sound, if you had a bell, if you hit it, it makes a sound. But when you're in the heart chakra, when it's unbeaten, you're in the heart of God. You're in the mind of God, where sound is. Sound is without it even being beaten. And so there's just this eternal vibration of love. There's this eternal vibration of music that's happening in that place. And it's a beautiful place. It's a place of bliss. Again, it's that third stage. We go from the shadows and reflections to seeing the moon and the stars and the magic. And then we go to the place of the sun, the place of the heart, the place of love. And so I'm inviting you all that as you continue to take the red pill in your life, whatever the choice you have made recently, as the song just said, it's not over, it's not finished. See, that's why we can sing that, because we know where we are. It's only the beginning when God is in it and God is in everything. We live, move, and have our being in God. We can say that all is well. Even when it's difficult, we can sing all is well. Even when the doors are closing, we can say all is well. Even when they're saying no, we can say all is well. We know that the no is really God's yes. It's just moving us to where the yes actually resides. And we remind ourselves that we're in the heart chakra. And it is there where all things are made new. I invite everyone to stand in this moment. As we recognize the power of our choices. As we recognize in this moment that just as Neo made choices, he made a choice to follow the voice of Morpheus as Morpheus guided him through the office. He made a choice to have a conversation with Trinity and to move forward and to take the red pill. And he made a continual choice to even save Morpheus when it looked like there was no way that he could be saved. We recognize in this moment that we are making choices in our lives. And we are grateful and thankful in this moment for the process. The process that is a loving process, that is a powerful process and a necessary process. In this moment, we forgive ourselves for any time that when we turned and looked at the light and we recognized that there was some pain and irritation and we turned back because we just weren't sure if that was the right way to go. We forgive ourselves for making that choice and we turn around again. And we lovingly give ourselves time to adjust. We lovingly give ourselves time to adjust. And as we move out of the cave into the sunlight, we are choosing to be easy with ourselves. As we move into the sunlight, we are choosing to be easy with ourselves, to be loving with ourselves, and know that, brother, sister, I am just going through the process. And so it is all good. Because I know the end of the story. I know that after I'm disturbed, I will marvel. And after I marvel, I will reign over all. And after I have reigned over all, I shall rest. And life shall remain easy and effortless. For that is the way it was designed. In this moment, I speak a word over each and every person in this room and each and every person that will hear this message. And I speak love over their life and over any situation in their life. I speak love over any difficulty and any challenge. I speak love over the moment where they may be choosing to take the pill again. Right now, in this moment, there may be two options in front of you, the blue pill or the red pill. And there's a piece of us that knows we should say yes to the adventure, but there's a piece of us that's used to the old familiar. I call forth the strength and the power that is within you now to make the choice. I call forth the strength and power and conviction that is within you now, the God that resides within you now, to make that powerful choice, to say yes to the adventure, to say yes to the journey, to say yes to the vision, to say yes to the business, to say yes to the new love, to say yes to the new career, to say yes to the change in your finances, to say yes to a new experience. Because it is possible for all of us, as we are created, as God created us. And we stand in that powerful vibration of creation. We stand in that powerful vibration of love, knowing that we are always in the heart chakra, the center. It is the chakra that holds all of the chakras together. It is in the middle. It is in the center. Love is in the center. It is in the situation at all times. We hold on to that, recognizing that it is a symbol to let us know that you, God, are always right. And so now we release these words in love. We release these words in gratitude, knowing that you will bring forth the fruit of these words back in our experience easily, effortlessly, efficiently, and without delay. For this I am so grateful, and I say, amen, amen, Ashe. And so it is. So it is. Thank you, God.